Saudi intelligence chiefs, and also with the head of the Bank of Credit and Commerce International, BCCI, the Saudi-Pakistani bank in which Adam and Turkey were both shareholders. In so doing, Casey was in effect running a second CIA, building up the future Al-Qaeda in Pakistan with the Saudis, even though the official CIA hierarchy in Langley, quite rightly, thought this unwise. In American War Machine, I situate the Safari Club and BCCI in a succession of second CIA or alternative CIA arrangements dating back to the creation of the Office of Policy Coordination, OPC, in 1948. Fenton himself invokes the example of the Safari Club in proposing the possible explanation that Blee and Wilshire used a parallel network to track al-Miqdar and al-Hazmi inside the United States. In Fenton's words, quote, withholding the information about al-Miqdar and al-Hazmi only makes sense if the CIA was monitoring the two men in the US itself, either officially or off the books. But a third option would be that the GID was monitoring their movements, a situation quite compatible with Saudi Prince Bandar's claim that Saudi security had indeed been actively following the movements of most of the terrorists with precision. Joseph and Susan Trento heard from a former CIA officer, once based in Saudi Arabia, that both Hazmi and Miqdar were Saudi agents. If so, they were clearly double agents, acting or posing as terrorists at the same time they were acting or posing as informants. In espionage, double agents are prized and often valuable, but to rely on them, as the example of Ali Mohammed illustrates, can also be very dangerous. This was particularly the case for the CIA with respect to Saudi Arabia, whose GID supported al-Qaeda energetically in countries like Bosnia in exchange for a pledge that al-Qaeda would not interfere with the politics of Saudi Arabia or any Arab country. Pakistan's ISI was even more actively engaged with al-Qaeda, and some elements of ISI were probably closer to the ideological goals of al-Qaeda than to those of Pakistan's nominally secular government. But in all cases, the handing of illegal informants is not just dangerous and unpredictable, but corrupting. To act their parts, the informants must break the law, and their handlers, knowing this, must first fail to report them, and then, all too often, intercede to prevent their arrest by others. In this way, the handler becomes complicit in the crimes of their informants. Such corruption is very widespread, perhaps inevitable. In the notorious cases of Gregory Scarpa and Whitey Bulger, agents in the New York and Boston offices of the FBI were accused of giving their mob informants information that led to the murder of their opponents. Agents in the New York office of the old Federal Bureau of Narcotics became so implicated in the trafficking of their informants that the whole FBN had to be shut down and reorganized. Even in the very best of circumstances, decisions have to be made whether to allow an informant's crime to go forward or to thwart it and risk terminating the usefulness of the informant. In such moments, agencies are all too likely to make the choice that is not in the public interest. A very relevant example is the first World Trade Center bombing of 1993. Relevant because Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the alleged mastermind of 9/11, was one of the 1993 plotters as well. the FBI had an informant, Ahmad Salem, among the plotters. And Salem later claimed, with supporting evidence from actual tapes of his FBI debriefings, that the FBI deliberately chose not to shut down the plot. I have 2 paragraphs summarizing the case. How many people here know a fair amount about the 1993 bomb? Well, I think I'll go ahead. How am I doing on time? Okay, good. I will read all of this because I'm going to argue it's extremely pertinent to what went wrong on 9/11. Here is Ralph Blumenthal's careful account in the New York Times of this precursor to the mystery of 9/11. Law enforcement officials, the FBI, were told that terrorists were building a bomb that was eventually used to blow up the World Trade Center, and they planned to thwart the plotters by secretly substituting harmless powder for the explosives, comma, an informer said after the blast, that is, Ahmad Salem. The informer was to have helped the plotters build the bomb and supply the fake powder, but the plan was called off by an FBI supervisor who had other ideas about how the informer, Ahmad Salem, should be used, comma, the informer said. Well, I'll skip the second paragraph. As you know, so there was an explosion. Only 6 people were killed, but more than 1,000 were injured, and there were damages in excess of $500 million. That is not a small event, and if the bomb had been placed in a slightly different place, there was a chance that it could have caused damage to the World Trade Center comparable to what happened in 2001. What makes the 1993 bombing even more relevant is that Salem, according to many sources, was an agent of the Egyptian intelligence service sent to America under liaison to spy on the actions of the Egyptian blind sheikh Omar Abdel Rahman. This raises the possibility that the FBI supervisor who had, quote, other ideas about how to use Ahmad Salem was a member of the liaison team with special knowledge he could not share with other FBI agents. It may have been, for example, that the Egyptian intelligence service simply declined to let Salem's cover be blown. This speculation is both speculative and problematic, but it has the advantage of offering a relatively innocent explanation for otherwise baffling behavior. This explanation does not at all rule out the possibility that some officials had more sinister motives for allowing the bombing to take place and covering it up afterwards. Sheikh Omar Abdel Rahman was at this very time a key figure in a sensitive Saudi program signed on to by U.S. officials as well of supplying Mujahideen warriors in Bosnia against Serbia. There's not been much publicity about this, but I have an article on this very subject went up on the web a couple of months ago. You can get it through my website by googling for Peter Dale Scott and Bosnia, and you will find it. It is clear from both investigative and prosecutorial behavior that a number of different U.S. agencies did not want to disturb Rahman's activities. Even after Rahman himself was finally indicted in the 1995 conspiracy case to blow up New York landmarks, the U.S. government continued to protect Ali Mohammed